Welcome to the Salt Block. Today we want to invite you to a conversation about what it means to be a Proverbs 31 woman in America today and around the world for that matter. This is hopefully not a controversial topic, but something that should get you thinking. Want to get those gears turning. What does it mean to be more precious than rubies from a godly perspective? Be sure to like, to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and more importantly, be sure to comment. The actual value of a stay-at-home mother is $184,000.
The Proverbs 30 woman she has the mind of God, walks in the ways of God.
I will tell you one thing: a godly woman will she will help you get to heaven if you're married to one, and if you're married to an ungodly woman, she will drag you to hell.
Your mom and I, we work together in that sense. She worked, I worked, but we both work with our children. Mm-hmm. Do you consider yourself to be blessed?
I'm blessed because I had a mother and a father who feared the Lord, and by the grace of God.
I hate me to say that.
There seems to be a lot of conversation and, dare I say, competition between men and women in the workplace.
Competition
between
men and women
in the United States.
In the workplace only?
Not just the workplace, but
everywhere, seemingly.
For today's conversation, we are talking about the workplace.
Okay.
But more importantly, there's lots of not just competition between men and women, but also conversations around the woman's role and should she be working in a corporate setting? Is she better served working at home? God forbid I put it in those terms. I don't want to get crucified up here. But some people would even say Christian women, for example, are maybe held back because there's this moniker, maybe there's a stigma attached to being a Christian woman, that they have to be at home and taking care of the kids and taking care of the family and not allowed to work. I think the Bible has a very specific portrait of a woman. A lot of people in Christendom refer to it as a Proverbs 31 woman. And today in the Salt Block, we're going to spend some time talking about
Proverbs 31.
Proverbs 31.
The book of Solomon.
Yes.
The books of wisdom.
A virtuous woman.
Proverbs, a virtuous woman. Very, very loaded question and also concept. In context, the virtuous woman of the Bible were written for women who generally had a virtuous man, and they were complementary. And the woman was always the helpmate for the husband, and they worked together for the family. But in a world of dysfunction, both in the family and children and roles and reversal of roles, it can be quite confusing for people to apply that to their own experiences today. Even though that is ideal for many, unfortunately, it is not the real. The real is the best because that's God's ultimate plan. Mm-hmm. And it's the best way. I mean, your mother and I, that's how we raised our family under those models. The righteous man, and we had also the godly woman.
Yeah, I think you just hit a nail on the head. There's a standard, and I think when you look at what a Proverbs 31 woman is, and we'll obviously have to define what that is, there's a standard that has been set in the scriptures, and the scriptures, the one thing that we know for a fact is the Lord's word does not change. It's just as relevant today as it was 5,000 years ago.
Is that why he said he's the same yesterday, today, and forever?
Forever. Yep, right. That's exactly why.
But Lord, that God, I change not.
Yeah.
His standards are still holy.
Yep.
Even for the family.
Yeah.
Even the marriage bed is also considered holy. But you're talking about the workplace, right?
Not just the workplace,
okay.
But I bring up the workplace because when you look at a Proverbs 31 woman, let's just jump into it.
Okay.
You see a person who, from the very onset, Proverbs 31 woman is talking about someone who is more precious and more priceless than rubies and set on a pedestal. Proverbs 31 verse 10 is where it starts and it ends at the very end, verse 31.
So are you saying that there are rubies more priceless than rubies? You mean to tell me that there are things that a mother can add to the family that a paycheck cannot add that are priceless and invaluable to the family?
Yes. The short answer is yes.
Okay.
Longer answer is not just a mother. I think you can be a virtuous woman with or without children.
Okay.
You can certainly be a virtuous woman if you have a husband. But I think the Proverbs 31 woman that's represented there, she personifies womanhood in general. It's the fullest extent of being a woman because she has children and she has a husband. And every arrangement is covered in the Bible. But specifically, it talks about a woman who's industrious. She not only works, but she works in her home. She works out of the home. She actually is an investor. She creates wealth. She generates wealth.
Sort of like a little home entrepreneurship type situation to supplement the family. And while also making sure that she's not an idle woman, not a gossiper, not spending her time on the phone, not watching soap operas, but her hands are not idle. That's what you're saying?
Literally what it says in Proverbs 31.
Okay.
She does not waste time. She gets up early. And it's some very, very, they lived in an agrarian society. Agriculture was kind of ruled the day.
Right.
So there was a lot of working in the fields and crops. But this particular individual, it talks about how she makes clothes for her children and how her husband can trust in her. And I mean, you said it yourself. The role of a woman, as God has ordained, is to be a helpmate for the husband and complement the husband. They are together working for one common goal.
Like, I guess you might say, how can two walk together
except they be
in agreement?
Yep.
And so it's agreement that both the husband and the wife walk in accordance with the word, that the word ordered their steps in the Lord. And by doing that, they're forever blessed. Do you consider yourself to be blessed?
I'm blessed because I had a mother and a father who feared the Lord, and by the grace of God,
hate me to say that.
they stayed together and they remained faithful to the Lord. And myself, as well as my siblings, we've all benefited from that.
Well,
but my mother was a virtuous woman. I can
relate to that very well.
I hope so.
Because your mother and I chose careers. Your mother's a retired nurse. Of course, I've been in education in many other fields in business, entrepreneurship for decades. But we chose occupation, and we were always someone to always be home with the kids. When I worked during the day, she worked the evening shift as a nurse. But she only worked 2 or 3 days during the week to complement the family. I cooked. I'm the oldest of 8. I helped raise my 7 siblings. And I had a situation. My father was there. He was not there. And so I started working there early on in life.
Was that a cost that you all weighed from the beginning? Was this an intentional plan, knowing that you had 2 children right out of the gates pretty quickly? Well, 3 right out of the gates.
Yeah.
Technically 4 right out of the gates.
Yeah.
But did you guys purpose to make sure your life was structured in such a way that everyone could have quality time with their parents without having to be passed off to sitters or others?
I don't like to sing a lot of secular songs, but here's what I'm going to sing for you. Papa was a rolling stone, yeah. Wherever he laid his hat was his home. That was my dad. And I decided to do everything opposite of him. And by doing that, it worked. I used the biblical model. Even though I didn't have a model, I saw no examples in my uncles, my cousins. Nobody had a good family that I could see. I was raised as a New York heathen, born in New York in the 50s. Child abuse, just a lot of things that black males went through, like my father, that they never got out of the issue of slavery that was still in them and their mindset, and how they treat their wives and their children. But I said, I will not be like some parents today who said they would not discipline the children, because you were disciplined, were you not?
Yes.
All right. But in love, correct?
I feel like I'm on a witness stand.
Can I get a witness? All right.
I was disciplined.
Okay. But in the doing so, it was correctly, according to the biblical model,
out of love,
to produce the fruit of righteousness in you. All right. And there was sometimes the spiritual rebellion that rises up in everyone. But understand, there's prayer, there's discipline, and understand spiritual things. So your mom and I, we worked together in that sense. She worked, I worked, but we both worked with our children, and we did not forsake the home.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example. I mean, if there's such thing as a virtuous woman, I would imagine you could say there's a virtuous couple. But I know the Proverbs 31 woman specifically, you don't get the label of being virtuous without having some morality applied to it.
Some good attributes.
Good attributes, but beyond that, like those, it's not good enough to just be good. It's virtue because it's tied to God. It's tied to holiness. Virtuous, it's tied to who God is. So a godly woman who listens to the Lord, who applies the things that the Lord commands of us and applies them to her own situation, specifically her home situation. I think it's what's laid out in Proverbs 31. And I think it's an excellent example of how any woman should carry themselves, with or without children, with or without a husband. I think there's a lot of nuggets that can be extracted from that.
You raised some good points here. I appreciate that.
All right.
The idea of a virtuous woman is against a complementary role. And the Apostle Peter addressed this issue because he was married. And Peter dealt with this issue in chapter 3 of his epistle. He stated that a godly woman does not adorn herself outwardly, with the long braids and the colors and all the makeup and hiding their true shell. A lot of women are hiding themselves from themselves because they're not dealing with the issues of their heart. And they go in excess trying to present a false image of themselves because they're trying to be like everybody else, to be accepted. Many women have been abused. They've been neglected. They've been rejected by their fathers. They have a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, and a lot of anger sometimes that ventilate towards men.
There's a lot of competition out there too.
A lot of competition and a lot of angry women and angry men too. But the virtuous woman, for what I understand, is a woman who have bathed herself in the love of God. And by her conversation, her action, and behavior, she is able to win, even if her spouse is unsaved, win him to Christ because her conversation, her walk, her talk, her behavior. You're married.
Thankfully. Yeah.
You got a couple of children.
I got a virtuous woman.
All right. And
yeah, you say something, when the scriptures talk about winning the woman who wins her husband over through her conversation, and you brought out the great point that it's not the words that are coming out of her mouth, but it's truly her actions. And her actions are what truly win him over. I think if you understand what a Proverbs 31 woman is, every man today, especially every Christian man, if you're a young Christian teen, or if you're an adolescent, you're just leaving the house and you're flying and you're trying to find a suitable helpmate, a suitable spouse. Every man wants a Proverbs 31 woman, but I remember in Ephesians,
every man don't deserve one.
Oh, that's right. You got to earn that.
To defile a Proverbs woman, to make her worse than yourself, is not good at all. Matter of fact, a wise woman would not marry someone that they would not be unequally yoked. They would not marry an unbeliever first. And number two, they will also find a person of like mind, because just because you go to church, because you say you believe in Jesus, that don't mean you're going to follow him.
Exactly. And if it's not enough pressure to be a godly man, and I think that pressure is a good thing, the Lord has given us his spirit, because the commandments for man, Ephesians 5 reminds us, husbands are supposed to love their wives even as Christ loves the church and gave himself for it. So the standard that the man is held to is none other than Jesus Christ himself. Have fun with that. You can't do that on your own.
Model.
Can't do it on your own.
Exactly.
Requires the Holy Spirit. It requires the Lord literally putting himself, his ability, his will, his power into you so you can live this life. And then to give yourself for your wife the way that the Lord gave himself for the church, that requires a bit of sacrifice.
Got to get with a lot of pride, because men have a lot of pride, right? And women have a lot of jealousy. But we have to balance this here, put on godliness and righteousness and holiness. By doing this here, putting on the fruit of the Spirit, we can become divinely possible to be that God would create us to be in his image and have the mind of Christ. I think that's what the Proverbs 30 woman has. She has the mind of God, walks in the ways of God, and desires to please him. In doing that, she pleases all those that are around her, including her children, her spouse, her employer, her neighbors. They will call her blessed because she's a godly woman indeed, not by word only, but by deed and actions.
That's right. So for all you men out there, if you're desiring a Proverbs 31 woman, make sure you're an Ephesians 5 man. That's the only way to unlock that key or unlock that box. The Lord requires a lot of us as couples. He requires a lot out of his children in the Lord. But in order to live up to that standard, you have to do some soul searching, some investing. And I'm talking to women here specifically.
Okay.
It's easy to point out all the flaws in men, but if you clothe yourself in righteousness, as you just mentioned earlier, you make yourself ready for this suitable helpmate, for this spouse. Hopefully you find a God-fearing man who exemplifies all the attributes of Jesus himself. That is where you get the connection that produces good fruit.
So my challenge is this is for all the preachers out there. The preachers, please stop pimping the women, all right, in the church. Prepare them to receive a spouse. Prepare them that you won't be their covering, but rather prepare them to be a woman of God using discernment, and that then you can be like the big brother, but let the women also understand that they are to walk in God and also in the fear of God and seek a spouse that will also be their pastor, be their priest, be their intercessor, and teach their family at home. I mean, that's what I did with you all. Maybe that's why you're here today, and your brothers and your sisters. Because we have 6 children, and you're the oldest of the 6. And I guess had my example with you And your mother example with us, how has that affected you as a young man?
How much time you got? I'm serious. I think about that. I think on my wedding day, I talked about that. Giving out accolades and the usual thank yous that you do at receptions. And there were plenty of people there, all of our loved ones. But I do remember going out of my way to thank my mom, as well as my sisters, because I remember thinking, I can't. I tried it. I can't just bring anyone home. It's got to be someone who's at least
Got that right.
That's
good. We'll have mom and dad there because you can't just bring anybody home.
Well, yeah.
Y'all knew better.
Knew better than that. But also, I saw a standard. There was a standard that in my mind, I'm like, this person that I find has to at least, meet the basic requirements. And that's, being someone who's grounded in the faith, water baptized, spirit filled, in covenant with God. Those are all things they just flow out of the mouths of Christians, but it actually means something. When someone who loves the Lord first, I think it's easy to love that person when you know that the Lord has co-signed in their life by baptizing them with his spirit.
Right.
And you see their walk, you see the fruit of their labor, the fruit of their efforts in the kingdom. All of that is a reflection of what I saw in my own mother. I thank my sisters on my wedding day because I remember thinking, they at least got to be better than my little sister, right? At least on par. But they were good examples, and it's because they had a loving mother and a loving father.
You know what's so wonderful about that? Both of your sisters came to your mother and father and asked us what we thought about their potential spouse. And I love the fact that you and your second brother, with your older sister, had to kind of work with her fiance at that time to see whether or not he's going to fit into the family, even though we've known him from a child. In other words, it was a family thing. And right now, I was just with him and others this past weekend in D.C. And you know what? The situation is we're all family. We have a very diverse family. I mean, your wife is Caucasian. I have another son whose wife is from South Korea. We all spent time in Russia. Both of their spouses, my daughter's spouses, are saved, holy men working and actively in the faith. I mean, we had a big gathering last Thanksgiving. We try to do this twice a year. All the children going on, by the grace of God, in about 2 weeks, you will have another one. We had 16 grandchildren. We all get together as a family. We love getting together. No drama, no jealousy.
It's like the United Nations without all the corruption.
Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what a godly woman can do, set the standard. Your mother did not undermine my authority. When y'all did not do right by her, I dealt with it, right? Because that back then, when your brother and sister did not do right, I left you in charge. And when they didn't listen to you, guess what? I dealt with it, okay? Yeah. We kept the order, we kept stability and the love in the family. And all of your siblings, how do they get along, by the way, because of a godly mother and a godly father? How do they get along with one another?
I think, we get along well, which is great. That's expected. I would say better than most. I mean, there's no sibling rivalries. There's no
rivalry, no jealousy.
Not the one sister you can't just pick up the phone and talk to because you have a beef that's gone for 10, 15 years. You hear all kinds of things.
We have a chat line. We communicate almost daily, all of us, right?
Yeah. And then there's a separate one with all the kids where we just make fun of you and mom. It's all just gifts and memes. No, you're joking. No, but it's how it's supposed to be. But it stems from a house that's in order. And I think when you have a helpmate who understands her role in God's eyes,
right?
She honors him by honoring you. Everything falls into place, and I think her name is known
in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's a beautiful picture.
So redefine the role of a woman. Matter of fact, many members of our Supreme Court, many members of the Democratic Party don't even know what a woman is, let alone a virtuous woman. Men are being defined. Satan is attacked on God's model of the family, every which way, shape, form, or fashion. And because it is here, there's mega confusion. But when that God is not the author of confusion, but Satan loves to operate in that jurisdiction and in that realm. Unfortunately today, few women can relate to the Proverbs 31 woman because their mothers weren't like that. The mothers had to struggle sometimes, and most often, should I say, being single parents. Trying to raise children economically. They had to work 2 jobs sometimes just to support themselves and couldn't even be at home with the kids. Kids raise themselves, latchkey kids. So now we're in a twix. How do you become a virtuous woman in a world where a woman is demonized or a godly woman is disenfranchised economically and considered a person of no value, no worth? That, my friend, is the question. And I know you have the answer.
I know where to find the answer. I know Proverbs 31, specifically verse 30, it tells us, favor is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. I think it all starts with fearing the Lord. I think the scriptures, they don't ever get old or dusty or not relevant. I think it starts with fearing the Lord. It starts with understanding your role in his divine order. And you can apply that to any situation. So specifically today, you see women who are, no faults of their own. It's just the nature of the culture we live in. Let me be very clear. There's a stigma attached to Christian women, and it makes it seem as if
they have no value, right? They take care of the kids, but the situation is their most precious commodity is their children. Mm-hmm. And you invest little in the children, they're going to reap a whirlwind later on.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, many children, they have no affection, little affection for their parents, very little respect. And as a result of that, there are women trying to raise men and trying to raise even their daughters without respect, without order in their home. It's a tumultuous experience for the parents. And many parents being victimized by the children, physically assaulted by the children, even killed by the children because women have abandoned the home out of necessity sometimes because of need to survive and work. And the men has abandoned the family altogether.
Yeah, it's a fractured home for sure. Women, the stigma that I was talking about with Christian women specifically, they seem to put an emphasis on at least trying to make an effort to be with their children as much as possible because they understand there's a role to play. By nature, women are more nurturing, they're more compassionate. Thank God, because you don't want a bunch of men raising babies from ages of 0 to 5. I mean, they're good for a lot of reasons, providing, protecting. Maybe not the best side, the best
nurturing
bedside manner. Yeah, 3 o'clock in the morning, kids feeling sick. Most guys will just roll over and be like, walk it off. Yeah.
Sleep.
I know it's a very sexist thing to say, but thank God for women who are compassionate. They go the extra mile. There's a purpose there. There's a quality tied to motherhood, and that nature comes from God.
That's innate.
It's innate. It's
right.
It's
that's looked at earlier where without natural affection, it says in 2 Timothy chapter 3, when it talks about verse 2 and 3, how that natural affection, women lose that there. And then they don't want to nurture their children from the suckling, and they don't want to take care of them. As a result, the children are thrown to the wolves. They're devoured. They come to school all broken. They come to school all in fear, trying to fit in, identity crisis, don't know who they are, listen to the media, listen to music, trying to just confuse. And that's exactly what the devil wants them to be, to talk them into sleep and tell them that there's something that they're not and confuse them and destroy their lives, even to the point of becoming suicidal. It's amazing.
I think about the fact that children they function at a genius level, they say, between like the ages of when they're like 1 and 3. And there's a time where you should be pouring into them, sowing into them. You can 2
to 5, they double in size, and that's the best time to teach a child as a second language. The brain development at a very rapid rate during that time.
Yes, absolutely. Which is the best time to pour into your child. Yes. Not just natural things, not how to tie your shoes.
But discipline and a whole lot of other things as well. Setting the standards at an early age.
Exactly. There's plenty of studies, and that'll be a whole other topic for a different day, but just looking at women who decide to not send their children to daycare, but if you send them there too early, it's not a death sentence. They will function. They'll be fine. They'll be protected if it's a good daycare.
But that bonding never really happens.
Not as well as it could. And the behavior is the biggest issue. So it's less about comprehension. It's, on the social side, they socially develop pretty quickly. And because they're around other kids, they get that naturally. But there's the discipline area that kind of comes into question because there's that 1-to-1 mother to child or parent to child ratio that you get at home. You don't necessarily get that in daycare when you have 5 or 6 kids to every one adult, sometimes more, depending what state you live in. But all that to say, there's a value placed on children and their ability to learn spiritual things at a very young age. The ability to pray, to know God is real.
Right.
You sow those seeds between the ages of 1 and 3, because I can experience it from my own children. It pays off huge dividends later on down the road.
But the behavior, the conduct, how they interact with adults and other children as well, become peacemakers, and also they become trendsetters. They become very self-reliant, independent, and also they're not easy to become followers like everybody else and kissing up to the crowd or being accepted by the bullies and bullied in classroom as well. They know how to handle themselves in a difficult situation because they're taught at home how to do so.
Yeah, and trust me, life is not going to come without its fair share of challenges. No one's going to be exempt from being bullied and all the things that come from just being a youth, adolescent.
But you have security, you have anchoring, you have also some backup at home that many children don't have. So the virtuous woman today, her greatest challenge seems to be how do you apply it in today in a time that women are undervalued, women are they're overvalued to the demise of men. And that is the other extreme in feminism, whereby which some have claimed that men are nothing more than undeveloped females, which is almost crazy. But some even go that far to it makes such absurdities. But reality is it's very difficult for females to live with the biblical model when you don't have a godly society, godly men, and also godly churches. Because a lot of churches themselves are dysfunctional, full of women and not many men there. When the men do come, they are put in positions of leadership that many times they're not qualified for. And there's a lot of sexual impropriety that goes on in churches and all the things that happen. People get disdained, they get, turned off, etc. So the virtuous woman today have to focus in being that godly woman, regardless of her circumstances, regardless of where she came from and her dynamics. She must let God be the light of her life and the word be her guide.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, again, feminism, it's a real problem in this country.
Okay.
It paints a standard that it's if you work to try to achieve that, and when I say a standard, independent women, I make money. It's for me. It's for my means. When you look at a virtuous woman in Proverbs 31, everything is geared towards the family, towards keeping her husband's name of high reputation, keeping her children, the clothes on their back, their servants are happy.
A woman of honor.
A woman of honor, a woman of dignity. She works hard. I mean, it talks about her physical strength as well. Everything that's painted in this is not a sloppy, lazy, stay-at-home mom who's doing nothing, mooching off of her husband. But the feminists today, they do all of that, but they remove God, and more importantly, it seems like a lot of them remove that purpose.
At the expense of the family too.
Yes, they're serving their own needs versus
the family's put on the altar of sacrifice is burned up, and there's nothing left but just they themselves.
I remember seeing this. It was I don't know if it was controversial, but it was an eye-catching little statement a couple years back, and somebody said, I don't know if it was an article. I just remember the caption that said, "I can't afford my wife." And, I'm thinking, what is this, like a Russian bride type thing?
Can't afford my wife, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it was actually pointing to a larger truth. If you go to salary.com, they just had a study they did fairly recently. And it was talking about the estimated worth of a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
And again, this is under the context that a lot of Christian women are demonized or saying that maybe, they're being oppressed by their husband or by this religion that puts a heavy emphasis on being at home for the children primarily.
So they've been fed those things, but by the media and by the feminist organization. And as Christian women being demonized, they've been exalted, but they don't understand the devil cometh to steal, to kill, to destroy. And I remember a lot of women in the 1960s, they said, I want to be liberated. I don't want no man. If I want a baby, I have one, but I don't want a baby to abort my child. But those children right now, or those adults right now, they're in the late 60s, 70s, and 80s. And guess what? A lonely, miserable, dying life. No family, all by themselves. You reap what you sow.
Yeah.
So reality is that since they were very selfish, narcissistic from the very onset, right now in their latter years, they have no family. They have no one. If they live long, because of the lack of social dynamics, we're social creatures. And without that, our life expectancy is dramatically cut short as well. So they're living the fruit of their doing now. They had their pleasure when they were young, but the consequences, and they're older and health problems, lonely. There's a lot of lonely people in Miami Beach back in the 1970s in nursing homes, all by themselves, dying slowly.
And unfortunately, a lot of these people are currently running our country too, but that's a different topic for a different day. But
yes,
you're right. But even getting back to
the worth, how much is she worth? Tell me.
Take a guess. If
Golly, you
No, let me put a disclaimer here. They go down the list. They say,
Okay,
this person is considered an academic advisor because
Okay.
they work with children,
Okay.
children in their home. And just for the reference, 50% of stay-at-home mothers have children under the age of 5. 85% of them consciously choose to stay at home
Okay.
if they have a spouse who works. So you're looking at people who are intentional about their actions, and their husband may make 50,000 a year, he could make 100,000 a year, but the actual value of a stay-at-home mother is $184,000, and that was
Wow.
the estimate as of
So
2022.
she's the nanny, she's the cook,
Yep.
she's the
This I'm not saying this personally.
Okay.
They, in the article, they said this she's also considered a janitor.
Okay.
Not my wife. I would not
custodian,
yes, please don't go home and call your wife a janitor.
sanitation worker.
Yes, or you will learn what the other side of the couch looks like. Staff nurse, a teacher,
Okay.
kind of everything involved. But she's managing the home. The
And
CEO
she does
of
it
the home.
24 hours a day.
Yeah.
All right. And on call at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And also she comes in when children distress at school and she's there.
Yeah.
And she is a part-time nurse as well when they're sick, right?
Handling all of that. And again, it goes back to, if you truly put a value, if you had to outsource all of the work, all the production that she has, if you had to hire a nanny, hire a cook,
And teach
hire
her homework
Yeah,
and the whole 9 yards.
exactly a tutor, it adds up. And
How about nursing? What about the early developmental years as an infant? Every 2 or 3 hours getting up and nursing or feeding the baby and losing sleep for weeks, sometimes a whole year.
Yes.
And no vacation, no vacation pay here. You know what I mean?
no vacation for the kids.
And you have, and that's all the time. So people forget the worth. Some things are intangible, and these are some of those things you're talking about, correct?
Which is, yep. I mean, again, her verse 10 tells us in Proverbs 31.
So what's the price on love?
Can't put a price on that. I will tell you one thing: a godly woman will,
Okay.
she will help you get to heaven if you're married to one, and if you're married to an ungodly woman, she
man.
will drag you to hell.
Intangible number one, love. Can't buy it.
No.
Love can't fake it. Sacrifice, right? And not expecting anything in return.
Mhm.
Agape love. And getting to heaven, can't beat that. Unfortunately, since most people today, I listen to the mouth, the children, the music they listen to, I say they have hellish mouths. Hellish because the profanity, vulgarity. Kids in elementary school can't even spell their name, but they can curse you out. This result of a dying, dead, decadent society, nobody raising children, but profanity, vulgarity through the music and their peers. Sometimes they have a baby mama who curses the children out in the marketplace.
Mhm.
Those type mothers are definitely not virtuous women. Let's pray for our children. Pray for our nation. Because we're in trouble right now. Our nation's hemorrhaging, and children, there's no one loving them and no one they're giving that undergirding they need to grow up healthy, sound, and definitely lacking wisdom.
Yeah, I would say if you're a virtuous woman, don't settle for anything less than.
Don't let nobody talk you out of it.
Right. Find your Ephesians 5 man. If you're an Ephesians 5 man, don't settle for anything less than a virtuous woman. And together, you guys can help usher in this last couple generations that's gonna get us across the finish line.
Well, check this out. My mother, I'm the oldest of 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody used to talk about my mother. Miss Ruby got all those kids. Miss Ruby got all those kids. Miss Ruby, everybody came to Miss Ruby's house to eat because the mother didn't feed them in New York, right? Came to the house. Everybody, we had a huge family. We had a bigger family. All of our neighbors come to my house to play. All right. Thing about it is that Miss Ruby children all living, all work together. Some rivalry every now and then, but despite everything, we still work together.
Yeah, I see it.
They model us. Say Miss Ruby's children are still living. Most of my peers I went to school with in New York, they're dead. We're all alive, all have families, large families, and all doing well in our professions. Who would have thought that Miss Ruby, the one that everybody despised and talked a whole lot about, is the one that's still standing on. She's 91
Amen.
in about a month, and she is pressing toward the mark of that high calling in Jesus.
Amen.
That's a virtuous woman. My mom.
Ironically named Ruby.
Ruby. More precious than gold.
Thanks for joining the Salt Block. If you like the content that you just heard, feel free to follow along by hitting any of the in-card links above. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe. Most importantly, leave some comments, hit that notification bell.